Hello everyone, this is part 38 of What If Naruto Was Adopted by Kakashi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Kisame Hoshigaki looked at the boy across from him as he adjusted his sword Samehada across his shoulder. The young teen in front of him showed no fear or hesitation, that was just fine by him. Kisame preferred enemies that didn't wet themselves in front of him. Those that came at him with full force always gave him a slight thrill after he defeated them. Kimimaro's body was covered in the black lines of his released state as more of his bones grew out of his body. In this state he was much stronger than before. Every physical ability he had was enhanced, even his senses were enhanced. He dug in his feet before kicking off and charging forward. He had to finish this quickly, he was running out of time. The man only stood his ground as he swung the weapon he carried. He had no idea what it was. It looked like it might be a sword, but it was rounded instead of having an edge to it, and it was all wrapped up in bandages. Kimimaro jumped forward to attack him with his bone spikes on his arm. The larger blue-skinned man was a lot faster than he thought. As the man ducked under the attack, his sword swiped torso on the side. The pain he felt wasn't normal as he jumped back to look down. What he saw was that instead of a cut, the side of his body looked like it had been dragged over gravel for a mile. Hey, didn't know that my sword Samehada doesn't cut, huh? Kisame grinned. My sword shaves, kid, which is a hell of a lot more painful. It lets more blood flowing too, but not too quickly, so you won't just bleed out like a stab or a deep cut. All that exposed nerves from the torn away flesh hurts to, I bet. Pain is nothing to me. Kimimaro pushed past the pain. He had lived with pain from his medical condition that was killing him. But he had to protect himself from that sword before he could complete his mission. Forcing the bones out of his torso, he wrapped them around his vital areas like armor. Then he forced them to form a large lance around his left arm as bones came out of his back. Oh, now there's an idea. Good on you, kid. Kisame grinned. He always liked a good opponent. The boy rushed him as he slashed with his sword as it clashed with the bone lance. He noticed that although his sword shaved off some of the bone, it was thick and strong. That was one of the weaknesses about his sword. Against flesh it was great, but put it up against armor and it took time to shave it away. Well, that only made things more interesting for him. Besides, he had plenty of other things to try out. So he decided to see how the boy would handle a less than normal attack approach. He might have been primarily a water jutsu user, but there was an earth skill he did know. He suddenly went into the ground and moved around it like water. This was the earth release. Subterranean voyage jutsu, an ability to move through the earth like a shark. In fact, he liked to place his sword out of the ground like a shark's fin. Kimimaro hadn't expected an attack from the ground. He dodged to the side to avoid him and knew that attacking through the earth would be problematic. But he had a way around this as he thrusts his fist into the ground. With a cry, he forced more and more of his bones form him into the ground around him. The field soon became littered with large sharp bones coming out of the ground in all directions. If he was using the ground as a way to move around, then he would simply take that away from him. Kisame shot out of the ground to land on the curve of one of the bones. There were a few rips in his cloak. That had been a close one there. This kid had a few surprises in him after all. Maybe he could take it up a notch to see just how good this kid could be. It was time to take it up a notch, deal with this one kid. Water release, great exploding water colliding wave. He jumped down and thrust his sword into a safe area of the ground. A geyser of water came up as the area was suddenly filled with water. Kimimaro suddenly found himself swimming in water as he was being weighed down by all the extra mass on himself. He had never been in water while using his bloodline limit. It was awkward to move around and the lance was dragging him down. Kisame thought it was time to let his little pets have a treat. He cut a thumb on his sharp teeth as he summoned up a few sharks. They could smell the blood from the wound he had given the boy earlier as they started to circle him. He wanted to see how the boy would handle this. Either he might die from lack of oxygen or the sharks might kill him. Unless the kid could fight him off, then he would deal with the boy himself. The sharks started to circle tighter as the first one made an attack. He blocked it with the lance as the shark tore into the bone. Its teeth sunk into it as he attacked the shark with his other hand, sending the bones into the shark's head. It went away like most summon animals, but that left other sharks to deal with. They suddenly all started to attack him, from all kinds of angles. His bones were helping to protect him, but his lungs were burning and he had to do something. He waited for them to get just close enough and then throughout his body sent massive bone spikes all over the place. All around him bones shot out, impaling all of the sharks. He also sent one massive one below himself to propel himself up out of the dome of water. He gasped as he broke the surface as ahead of him Kisame jumped out of the water and standing on it. Well, I'm impressed not many could make it through that. Kisame readied his sword as he looked at the kid. Ready for the next round. Kimimaro was there motionless looking at him not moving. Kisame grinned as he rushed forward and with a swing slammed his sword into the side of the kid's head, but the boy made no move to dodge. That actually threw Kisame as there was no reaction. He pulled the sword away and still no reaction as he leaned down and took a closer look. Damn, it's no fun when they just drop dead like this, Kisame muttered, seeing the kid hadn't shown any signs of life, even the bleeding had stopped as there was no heart pumping the blood. If he had to guess, the kid had died somehow right after he broke the surface. He had no way of knowing that the boy was dying and pushing himself like he had just used up the last flames of his life in a moment. Kisame let the water go away, washing away, leaving the boy in a tower of bones. He looked at the area. The whole area was littered with wet bones with the boy on high. He wasn't normally one for contemplating matters, but he had to admit the scenery did speak to some part of him. He looked up to where the kid was and grinned. Well, you were fun, kid. Too bad you kicked it so soon. It would have been fun to finish this. Kisame told him before heading off to see if Itachi had more luck. Orochimaru and Jiraiya. The two Sannin had been battling each other, throwing everything they could at the other. Jiraiya had to admit that Orochimaru hadn't slowed down in the years since they had been both young men fighting in the war together. Hell, the guy had even picked up a few nasty tricks. Well, that was fine by him. He might have gotten old, but he learned a lot himself. He was a lot more durable these days and he had gotten a lot more tricks up his sleeve. Still, it was a hard-pressed fight as the area around them had been decimated by their conflict. Trees were uprooted, overturned or just obliterated. Small fires were still forming, but with all the mud, slim and swamp that covered the area, it wouldn't spread. Jiraiya had tried to use those techniques to slow down Orochimaru as everyone was slower in mud and swamps, but the man was more of a snake than man sometimes as he just slithered his way across the battlefield. There were hundreds of small snake corpses littering the area that Orochimaru had used, but Jiraiya had dealt with it in a very flashy and explosive way. Kakashi would have been impressed by the battle if the stakes weren't so high. He had to keep hidden in the hopes that in the right moment he would be able to jump in at the right moment. It was hard to keep his concentration. Molding the chakra was taking a toll on Kakashi. He wasn't an Uchiha, so it was always difficult to use his Sharingan, but what he was doing was pushing beyond anything he had ever tried in battle. There was still a lot he didn't know about the Sharingan. A lot of the secrets died with the Uchiha, so Kakashi had to learn a lot as he went. The technique he was using was something he had only used once in practice and that laid him into the hospital for chakra exhaustion. Still, it was the only shot. He had spent years getting stronger and hoping that he could use this. He felt the chakra slowly getting into his closed eye. He could feel the shift and change in it. The day that Rin died, he felt it change like this. When he tried to replicate the feeling, it had taken him weeks. Now he was rushing, trying to get this technique to work. If he did pull this off, he was going to train himself so that he could do this a lot better in the future. Something told him he might need it later on. Finally, he felt it. It was a strain on his body, but Kakashi could feel it. He opened his closed eye as his Mangekyo Sharingan was formed. The red eye now had a whole new black symbol, 3 long lines that became points, each point curving to the right to merge back into the base of the next line. Kakashi hoped that he would get an opening soon because just holding the eye like this was a major strain. Jiraiya took a moment for a breather. There was a small calm in the fighting now as both of them were gauging the other. He had to admit that Orochimaru hadn't slowed down in the years they had last been a team, but he had learned a few tricks to keep ahead of him. Although he also hadn't seen Kakashi in a while, he knew the man was still here and most likely had something up his sleeve. He would have jumped in at any time if he could, so Jiraiya had tried to drag things out. He had already heard sounds of other battles in the distance, so the kids were already having their hands full. He hoped that whatever Kakashi had planned, it would end the fight sooner. Maybe if he got Orochimaru talking, it would allow for Kakashi to strike. That old snake always did like the sound of his voice. Seems you weren't lying about not slowing down there, Jiraiya told him with a grin. Although you still have those bad habits of yours in a fight, can't stop showing off being one of them. This from the man that always tried to impress Tsunade. Orochimaru smirked back at him. All these decades and you still can't get over her, that's just pathetic. Says the man that hasn't had a relationship in, ever, he shot back. Plus you do remember what Tsunade looks like, any man would wait forever to climb those mountains in her shirt. Always the perverted fool, Orochimaru sighed. I think if it wasn't for that you would actually show promise. While this was going on, Kakashi finally had his opening as he started to use a technique that he had only used once before. This time he felt more control, but it was taking everything to keep it going. He focused on Orochimaru, but it felt like his eye was being pulled in other directions, like trying to steer a boat on a river with different streams. Then he saw it, the small dark hole was forming, but it was a little off. He was aiming for Orochimaru's upper torso and head, but it was moving lower no matter how much he was trying to keep his original aim. Now he was just trying to keep whatever this was on Orochimaru's body. Jiraiya was running out of things he knew that would push Orochimaru's buttons. That was on advantage to their old friendship. He knew exactly what irritated him. That's when he saw it, a small dark hole forming around Orochimaru's legs as a vortex slowly started to form around it. This was certainly not something Jiraiya was expecting, as he had never seen anything like this before. Orochimaru looked down as well when he noticed Jiraiya's eyes focusing on something and saw the surprise in them. That's when he heard the swirling sound and also felt a tug on his legs. Looking down, he saw a small vortex forming as the pulling sensation got stronger and stronger. His eyes widened, knowing something extremely dangerous when he saw it. He would focus later on what happened and what caused it when he was safely away from this thing. He tried to move away, but the pull was getting stronger and stronger. He put all his effort into jumping, but already his body was being pulled into the vortex. His body was being pulled apart, and if he didn't act fast, then he was going to die. He hadn't come this far to just die from something like this, as his mind came up with only one option. His mouth opened as fingers came out, pulling it wider than humanly possible as another him started to come out of his own mouth. This was a special body replacement technique he had developed himself. It allowed him to regenerate his entire body by shedding the old one like a snake's older skin. The only problem was that this would take most of his chakra, but that was a small sacrifice. He leapt out of the mouth of his old skin just in time to see it pulled into the vortex. Nice try. If I had been a little slower, that might have killed me. Orochimaru smiled in triumph over his old friend. Somehow I doubt you can do that again so soon either. Jiraiya wasn't sure if Kakashi could pull something like that off again or not. So he was going to bluff this out. The kids could be in trouble, and honestly this battle could go on all day long between them. He wasn't as young as he used to be, and already his knee was acting up a little. Oh, trust me, I can keep going, but I think an old man like you would need a rest. Orochimaru could feel his chakra levels were too low for a prolonged battle. In his current shape, a prolonged battle wouldn't be in his best interest, and although he wasn't sure what kind of jutsu was just used on himself, he couldn't take another one if it was possible. As much as I've enjoyed this, I think our final battle is in another time and place. Orochimaru told him as he took a step back into the trunk of a tree as he slowly merged into it. He was going to retreat for the day, hoping that Kabuto had enough time to get all traces of his base here cleaned away and for the Sound 5 done with their own missions. Damn slippery bastard, Jiraiya muttered and looked for Kakashi. The man came out of his hiding spot, his eye covered and looking a little pale. You okay? Yeah, but that took a lot more out of me than I thought, Kakashi told him, a little winded. I'm going to have to train myself to use that more than just once and to cut the time down to how long I can use that. Interesting technique you got there, Jiraiya told him. But let's get going, I think the kids might be in trouble as well. Can you move? Try to stop me, Kakashi told him, standing up. He knew it wasn't over yet and he would push himself into the grave to make sure his team survived. Elsewhere in the forest, Tayuya stood her ground on the tree branch as her fully released seal had changed her into a stronger but more demonic-looking form as her 3 Doki monsters flanked her. She had her flute pressed up against her lips as she played her notes. They rushed out towards their target as Itachi stood there silently watching them. It was only when they were just on top of him that he moved like lightning. With only the minimalist effort he was able to dodge and avoid their attacks. They were large and fast for their size, but he was faster. He danced among them as Tayuya played her flute as fast as she could to increase their movements, but he was always one step ahead of them. He jumped onto the trunk of a tree sticking there as his cloak folded back around him. Interesting, a genjutsu that uses sound, Itachi spoke up as Tayuya paused for a second. You use the flute to carry sound waves that implant the idea of these creatures. I haven't seen sound used to carry genjutsu before like this. Tayuya didn't like that he had analyzed her ability this quickly. Most just thought she had summoned monsters, not that they were actually a creation of her genjutsu abilities. Well, even if you figured it out, what do you plan on doing? Ripping off your ears? Once you hear the sound, you can't stop seeing them until I stop playing. She started playing against as the three monsters rushed at him. Itachi stood his ground just as calmly as before, but this time he didn't move. Tayuya grinned as her creatures slammed their massive forms into him, but then faltered when Itachi's body turned into a group of ravens flying away, leaving nothing there. She didn't understand what he had done. She looked around but didn't see anything. She was about to bring her flute up to her lips again, but choked out a cry as she felt the cold metal steel impale her in the back. She stood there frozen as her body went into shock as she heard his voice behind her. Although that is a unique technique, you've only developed one half of your genjutsu abilities, it seems, Itachi told her, one hand on the weapon in her back, the other holding her upright. He had hit her kidney, which locked up the body from all the nerves being damaged. It was also a lethal blow, and she wouldn't last much longer. Genjutsu is a subtle art, not a blunt weapon, and you must develop both offensive and defensive. Since you only focused on the one, you never noticed that you were placed under my own genjutsu as soon as our eyes locked. Tayuya tried to say something but couldn't. Her whole body refused to move. She couldn't believe that he had gotten her under a genjutsu this entire time. As her strength left her, she reverted back to normal. Maybe you'll do better in the next life, he told her before letting her fall to her death. As her lifeless body hit the ground, Sasuke and Sakura were the only ones left. Sasuke felt the burning desire to kill his brother building in him, but he had no idea what he could do. He knew that he still wasn't ready for this, but he had no choice, it would seem. He thought about Sakura with him. Maybe she could run off and get help if he gave her an opening. At the very least, he wanted to make sure someone else didn't die by his brother's hands. He had been too young to do anything against his brother. He couldn't save his parents or anyone else in his clan. Kakashi had nearly been killed. He was also after Naruto for some reason. Just how much was he going to lose to this man? Sakura, when you see an opening, run and get Kakashi, Sasuke told her quietly as his brother slowly made his way to the ground. I'm not leaving you to face him, she told him, although she had nothing but fear in her stomach. This was one of the most dangerous ninjas in the world. But she pushed that fear down because she was a ninja herself and she wasn't going to let fear take over. Even if she did feel like they were about to die, she wouldn't let him die alone. Sakura, he started, but she cut him off. No. We're staying together in this, she told him sternly, giving him a hard look. We're a team and we stay a team no matter what. You should listen to my little brother, Itachi told her. I have no interests in you, only my little brother and the two Jinchuriki. Like hell we'll let you get close to them, Sakura told him, trying to summon as much courage as she could not to have her voice crack. She felt she did a decent job since she basically was standing up to what many considered to be a demon that walked among the living. Sasuke was torn between trying to get her out of here and a bit thankful for her support. He would decide later, if there was a later, what he would feel. Sakura, whatever you do, don't look him in the eyes. Sakura nodded her head as she had avoided Itachi's eyes since he had explained to the sound girl how he had trapped her in a genjutsu. Sakura had a little training in that, but not to the level of being able to see through a master's skills. In fact, she wasn't sure if anyone could touch Itachi in genjutsu skills, at least no one in Konoha from what she knew. Sasuke had his Sharingans locked onto Itachi but not looking into his brother's eyes. He looked at the body, unfortunately, that was covered by his cloak, but any small movement and his eyes would catch it. He rushed in as he knew his brother wouldn't make the first move. That wasn't his style. Sasuke drew his sword as he heard Sakura was running behind him. He knew from all their training together she would follow up on his attack, which he planned for. He swiped at him, but his brother intercepted the blade with his own kunai. Sakura jumped over Sasuke, swinging her tonfa down onto the rogue ninja. Itachi jumped back to dodge the attack as Sasuke took his turn to throw several throwing stars he had gone for when Sakura attacked. This was the best strategy that he could think up. Keep up 2 different attacks, keep Itachi on the defensive and don't let up. He knew that the chances of winning were still so low that he didn't think that a number could do it justice, but this was their best shot. As they continued to tag team fight, Itachi throwing everything they would at him was working better than just himself. Maybe there was something to working together to take down his brother after all. Sakura had no real stake in his grudge against his older brother, but she was fighting with everything she had. Sasuke used a fireball next as Itachi countered with one of his own as the fireballs exploded, making a blinding light and heat. Sasuke had to close his eyes from it, feeling the heat wash over him. When he blinked his eyes open, he saw the form of his brother a few feet away from himself. He tried to react, but everything was just so slow it seemed. His body just wasn't reacting as he wanted it to as Itachi kicked him in the stomach. He felt his blade drop from his hand as the force sent him into a tree. The hardwood slammed into his back, making him cry out in shock and pain as before his body slumped against the wood. He struggled to get up, seeing stars as he was trying to force his body to move. The jarring hit had temporarily knocked his senses. He was able to get his legs under him and force himself up, still leaning against the tree. He could hear sounds of fighting as he shook his head trying to focus. Then he felt someone grab his neck and hoist him up against the tree. Now that he was focusing, he could see Itachi in front of him holding him with one hand, with the other he had Sakura, his hand gripping her mouth. She was struggling, but with his long reach she couldn't hit anything much. He then noticed that his hand was not only covering her mouth but also her nose. She couldn't breathe with his hand like that on her face. All this time and you're still not motivated enough, it seems, Itachi said coldly to him. I wanted to see if making you angry would give you what you needed to surpass me, little brother. You never could. The way you were, the old Uchiha way, was stagnant and things needed to change. But you showed promise, little brother. You weren't like the rest at the moment. I wanted to see those eyes of yours filled with hatred to push you further, to motivate you to become stronger. It seems like you might need a bit more motivation. His hand tightened on Sakura as she was starting to move slower from the lack of air. Sasuke felt the tight grip on his own throat tighten as his brother's eyes started to change. He had seen those eyes before, right before his brother had sent him into a nightmare world for 3 days. Maybe I'll make you watch the girl die before I remind you that you need to do better, Itachi told him in that cold, clinical way. Sakura felt the edges starting to darken. She knew that if she didn't do anything she would die, and then Sasuke would be all alone against his brother. She wanted to do something, anything in that moment, but her arms felt too heavy to lift. Her lungs burned and she needed to breathe. She had to do something. Remember to never give up. A memory suddenly came to her, from her training with Anko after the Forest of Death part of the Chunin exams. If you got a weapon, use it. If you lose it, the weapon, find another one. Find a rock, hell, a stick if you have to. If you can't find that, use your nails, your teeth. Never give up fighting. If you give up, then you're going to die. So never give up. Fight with everything you got. Kick, scratch, claw and bite your way to survive if you have to. She remembered Anko's words and she could only think. She shifted her head just enough and bit down as hard as she could. She felt the taste of blood in her mouth but didn't stop. She kept biting down with all her strength. Itachi hissed out and threw the girl away. Sakura landed in a heap as she gasped for breath. He looked at his hand. The girl had bit down pretty hard from the amount of blood. He would have to wrap it up later. Well, that was unexpected. She has a bit of fire in her, little brother. Sasuke saw what Sakura had done. He had to admit he admired that she hadn't given up, but she had only bought herself a little time. But he also realized that for this split second his brother was distracted and he had an opening, but for what? That was the question. Sakura's bite had given him an idea. Sasuke gripped his brother's wrist, knowing that this could end up very badly for him as well, but it was worth it. He started to gather up chakra and turn it into lightning in his hands like he had practiced to use with his sword. He was going to send a lightning bolt through his brother's arm right into him like in practice. The only problem was he had never done this with human flesh and it could end up coming back at him. Itachi noticed at the last moment what Sasuke was up to something and threw him away just as there was a flash and a small crackle of energy. Sasuke hit the ground near Sakura as Itachi looked down at his arm. Although he had thrown Sasuke away, it hadn't been fast enough not to take any damage. The left sleeve was ruined as he looked at his arm. There were slight electrical burns on his arm. He tried to flex his arm and hand, but even as he was fighting the pain he could barely move it. The wound wasn't going to be permanent, but it would take some time to heal and his arm would be useless for a time. Well, that was a lesson for himself never to underestimate someone as he looked to his brother. I'm impressed, little brother, you've learned a new trick, Itachi told him. Sasuke got to his knees as looked over at Sakura. You okay? She nodded and looked to Itachi, knowing that they were still in trouble. She had no idea how they would survive this, but with only one hand he wouldn't be able to make any kind of hand seals, but he still had those eyes and the rest of his body. He was an elite ninja and one arm might not slow him down too much. Itachi started to move towards them but suddenly stopped as he started to look to the left. Both young Chunins looked to see two more figures showing up. It was Gaara and Naruto who arrived and both of them paused seeing Itachi there. Oh come on, not another one. Naruto shouted out seeing the black and red cloaks. Ha! Hey, he's got Sharingan eyes. That would make him Itachi Uchiha. Gaara told him he had read up on a lot of ninjas in the bingo books. Mainly from trying to prove his own existence by killing strong opponents, plus Itachi was one of the world's most infamous ninjas. Not just anyone could boast about killing their entire clan in one night. Naruto stiffened at the name and looked to his two teammates. They looked a little worse for wear, but they looked okay. Itachi looked a little worse, but still this was the guy that not only killed his friend's family but also put his father into the hospital. Part of him knew that fighting even one member of the Akatsuki wouldn't end well, but the other part wanted to really punch that guy in the face a few times. Itachi stood there as he took stock of the situation. He had two Jinchuriki here and two Chunins, judging by the vests that Sasuke and the girl wore, both of who were getting up and getting ready for a fight. There was also the fact that his arm was useless. It wouldn't give him too much trouble if he took out the two Jinchuriki quickly enough. But the problem was that he needed both of them still alive, and that would make things more difficult. That is until he saw Jiraiya and Kakashi show up, then things got a lot more complicated. Kakashi he had dealt with before, although he got the feeling he might not fall for the same trick so easily. As for Jiraiya, well, that was a man that he wasn't sure he could take on a good day. Now that he couldn't use his arm for the moment, he wasn't looking forward to fighting the man figuratively with one arm tied behind his back. The odds were not in his favor in this. It was time to find Kisame and leave. I see our time if over. See you later, little brother. Hopefully next time we meet your eyes will be a little stronger looking. Itachi jumped away as he started to make his getaway. Hey, where do you think you're going? Naruto shouted out, making like he was going to take off. Naruto. Kakashi shouted at him in a commanding tone, making the boy freeze in place. Let him go, we have other matters to deal with and we're in no shape to give a chase. Kakashi turned to Sasuke and Sakura. Are you two okay? I think so, Sakura told him as Sasuke nodded, but he didn't look happy about letting Itachi go, but he wasn't sure they could take him at the moment. There would be another time that he knew that much, and he was going to be ready the next time he met up with his brother. He just hoped he had the time needed to get stronger, but something else got him thinking. Fighting with Sakura made him wonder if there was another way. Maybe there was something about having strength in numbers. It was certainly something to think about for the future as he picked up his sword. He was also going to try and work more on some new lightning techniques. Anyone seen my brother or sister? Gaara asked, looking around seeing them missing. There were blank looks as everyone looked at each other. I think they're coming, Kakashi said, hearing movement of two people quickly making their way towards their position. Although he wasn't too sure, it might be a good bet as Itachi wouldn't double back with his partner at this point, at least he hoped not. They waited until Temari and Kankuro showed up, looking a little out of breath and a little ragged from their own battle, it would seem. Hey, what did we miss? Kankuro asked. I think it's time for a little debriefing, Kakashi said, looking at the two dead sound ninjas in their area. Yeah, we got two more ourselves, Temari said, seeing what he was looking at and that they wore clothing in similar style to the ones they had fought. We kind of left one behind, Naruto scratched the back of his head. What? Why? Kankuro asked. We got ours. An Akatsuki showed up, Gaara commented. He was dealing with him when we left. Okay, I think we really all need to compare notes, Jiraiya said, rubbing his head as he got the feeling they might have really stepped into something. At least everyone on their side seemed to have come out unharmed for the most part. That was a plus in his books, but it really was bad luck that they had ran into Akatsuki of all times in a mission like this. They had not just one but two boys they were after as well. Both were underprepared for such an encounter. He was going to have to think about what to do about that for the future. Orochimaru was able to quickly get to his hideout. The large stone snake head-shaped opening stood before him. He was already starting to feel a bit winded from using that jutsu to replace the damage to his body and his battling with Jiraiya. They had to move to another of their bases before the others caught up since he needed time to recover. As he walked through the dark woods he paused as he looked at his right hand. It was shaking slightly. He pulled it up and took a longer look. It wasn't fatigue or damage that was the cause, the nerves were misfiring. He scowled slightly. This body was starting to wear a little thin and he would need a replacement soon. He clenched his fist tightly for a few seconds and opened it. The shaking had stopped, but it was a sign that his body was running out of time. He continued to the entrance, and as he got to the opening he found his most trusted servant waiting for him. Everything ready? Orochimaru asked Kabuto. I've had the base cleared out, Kabuto told him as the two men left the entrance and got into the open area of the forest. All personnel, documents, weapons, devices and anything of importance that could be moved have been. Anything that would take too long to move or impossible to move have been destroyed. Excellent. Orochimaru knew the value of servants like him. People like Kabuto were hard to find and, as he had shown, was worth his weight in gold. There is one problem, unfortunately, Kabuto said as Orochimaru paused to look at him. None of the Sound 4 or Kimimaro has returned. The Snake Sannin didn't like the sounds of that. Those 5 were his personal guard, the best of his forces that had survived the curse seal placed on them. The fact that none of them had returned meant that either they had been slowed or defeated. That did not sit well with him. If they had died before bringing Sasuke to him, then not only would he have to choose a new host soon, but also that he would have to replace his personal guard. This is distressing news, Kabuto. The boy bowed his head. I apologize. As soon as it's possible I'll send out scouts to find out what happened to them. Yes, and if they had fallen it would seem that I will need stronger soldiers in the future. He looked to the entrance as he judged they were far enough away. I think it's time to bury our tracks. At once, Kabuto made a hand seal as the paper bombs he placed ignited. They were linked to many others as a chain reaction happened. Large explosions happened under the ground as the ground gave in, burying the base under the earth. Even if Konoha or anyone else came here they would have to dig through miles of earth, and even then it would be a wasted effort as nothing of value would be intact. With that both men left the area as the noise would attract Jiraiya and his team. It was 30 minutes later when the joint force arrived. They had taken time to compare notes and look for any injuries. Kakashi had to take things slow as his chakra was running low, as well were a few others. By the time they came to the ruins where the massive explosion was heard, Jiraiya had already guessed what they would find before they arrived. The veteran ninja knelt down by the pile of rubble and slightly caved in ground. Looking around, the entire complex most likely had been entirely underground. That was something he should have figured his old friend would have done. Not only that, but now he started to see why it was so hard to find the Sound Village if it was underground. But the fact that he destroyed this place only told him that this wasn't the main facility. Looking around though, the place looked far larger than what he would expect for an outpost. If he was making huge places like this and scattering them all over the known world, well, that meant he would have to rethink how to hunt down Orochimaru. He wasn't sure what Orochimaru was up to, but he would have to try and find out. Looks like we won't find anything here, Jiraiya said, standing up and stretching out his back. Looks like he covered his tracks and most likely moved to a new place. Any way we could track them? Temari asked. He shook his head. He's too good at covering his tracks. Took me nearly a year just to find this place. Plus I don't think we're in any shape to go after him if he has a whole army to throw at us. We had the element of surprise for a while, but now he knows who we are and what we might be able to do. He'll plan for that and we won't get away so easily from the next battle. Looks like we got to go back and report to Tsunade what we found. He wasn't looking forward to telling her that although a base was now out of action, there were most likely any number of them still active. So what, we go back to Tsunade now? Kankuro asked. Jiraiya thought about it. I think you should stick with us, at least until we get to Konoha. If those two are still lurking around, they would pick you three off a bit too easily. No one needed to ask who those two were, as the two Akatsuki members, while not at full strength, were still out there somewhere. Plus, if they went to get help, who knows who else would show up. The three Suna ninjas gave each other a look as they silently agreed that for the time being they needed to rest up and get back to full strength. Alright, I think that's a good idea, Temari told him. Naruto looked at his dad. He looked really tired and he was a bit worried. Hey Pops, you okay? Just a reminder that I need to train a bit more and increase my chakra reserves. Kakashi gave him a smile to let him know he was okay. Although I could use a nice rest soon. Yeah, I think we all could use a break, Sakura sighed. Well then let's get going. If we leave now then we can get there before nightfall. Jiraiya told them, starting to walk. Wait, get where? Sakura asked, looking at the others, but they had just had blank expressions. It was just sundown when they made it to a roadside inn. It was a fairly large place, but what caught everyone's attention was the sign that read, "Local hot springs" by the main sign. Everyone turned to look at the old man, who had a red flushed face and grinning like an idiot. Everyone else suddenly realized why he had picked this place. Okay, we're going to another inn. Temari suddenly spoke up. Yeah, we're not here to help you be a total pervert, Ero Sennin. Naruto shouted at him. Hey, a hot spring is the best kind of thing you can get after a hard mission, plus Kakashi is nearly ready to drop. You want him to sleep outside in his condition? Jiraiya asked Naruto, who only looked at his dad. Kakashi was looking like he was barely standing by this point. Okay fine, Naruto muttered. What about the rest of you? Want to keep going on because it's 5 hours until the next inn? Jiraiya asked them. They didn't feel like walking for that long, as they did need the rest. So they all had to agree on staying here for the night. The girls decided to share a room, as the boys ended up with 2 rooms of their own to split up between them. After a meal and an offer by the staff to use the hot springs, they eventually decided to try it out. Sakura and Temari walked into the hot springs area with towels around their bodies. There didn't seem to be many other women here, so the both of them took a spot near the giant bamboo wall that separated the women's section to the men's section. Both of them sunk into the water as they felt the hot water on their bodies. Oh, that feel nice, Temari said, resting her head against the rock as she sunk down to her shoulders. There is nothing like having a hot spring after a mission like that, Sakura sighed, starting to feel a little relaxed. It felt good on her muscles after everything they had been through, the fighting and all the traveling nearly non-stop. Although she couldn't say she was totally happy about the end result of the mission. They found what was left of a sound base, but it was buried to the point that there was no real reason to start digging it up. They were back to square one with trying to find where sound was located, but at least they came out of it alive. She was worried when Itachi showed up. That was a moment she was sure she was going to die, but somehow things worked out. Although Sasuke had been kind of moody after it, so she gave him space to think about things. I wish we had these in sooner, Temari sighed, feeling relaxed. Water is very precious, so we have to conserve it, being in a desert and all. So when we finally get missions outside of Sooner, I really enjoy visiting hot springs. We should hit the ones in Konoha then before you go, Sakura sighed, feeling her muscles loosening up. She looked over at the blonde girl next to her. She was only a couple of years older, but she was much more mature than she expected for someone her own age. Plus she couldn't help but notice the beauty of her. As Sakura's eyes lowered a bit, she felt a little inadequate in the chest area. Sakura sunk down lower so her lower face touched the water. For a moment she didn't say anything, but she got up a little to ask her a question. Hey Temari-san, do you know how to get a boy's attention? Temari's eyes snapped open as she quickly looked at Sakura. Why would you ask something like that? Well, it's just that there's a boy I like, but I'm trying to get him to make the first move, to notice me more than just a friend. Temari paused before sighing. Look, I don't know anything about boys and I have 2 brothers. Really? Sakura was surprised by this. But you're really pretty, so I figured boys would notice you more. You forget a few things. Temari got a slightly gloomy look to her. First, my father was the leader of the village and my little brother used to be a total psycho monster. Not exactly the kind of family you want to sit down and have dinner with or meet. Temari may act cool and calm all the time, but she was a teenage girl. There had been plenty of cute guys she had thought about, but she never even got to talk to them. They always were so scared around her that it was a real mood killer. Oh, I guess that wouldn't help. Sakura felt a bit bad for the older girl now. Well, Gaara isn't as bad anymore and, well, that should help, right? She was about to bring up her father but stopped herself quickly. That wasn't a good thing to bring up, given the man wasn't dead all that long. Temari did notice the pause and had a feeling she knew what Sakura was going to bring up, but stopped herself. Although her father hadn't been the best of fathers, in fact seeing Kakashi with Naruto made the blonde girl slightly envious that he had such a good relationship. Temari couldn't remember any time her father had been playful or even all that kind to her. Still, it was hard to put into words how she felt about her father's death, so she just pushed it away for now. Feeling the warm water soothe her body, she thought about her life now. With her father dead and Gaara being less of a monster and more of a human being, she wondered if a brave boy would ask her out. She felt her hopes dash as she knew it would take time for people to accept Gaara, and even then she doubted anyone from Suna would work up the nerve. Honestly, I think I'm the last girl to ask about boys, Temari said honestly. Besides, I do have some standards. They got to be okay in the looks department. I'm not too picky, but they have to have a spine, a good ninja, and smart enough for me to talk to. If there is one thing I couldn't stand, is someone that is all muscle and no brains. Sakura smiled a bit as the older girl seemed to relax and open up a bit. Well, I'm sure you won't have much trouble getting a guy. Thanks. Temari cast the younger girl a look. So, what's the story between you and the Uchiha boy? Now it was Sakura's turn to sigh. I guess I should start at the beginning. In the male section, the boys were relaxing as well. Even Sasuke took a moment out to let his mind drift. He had been thinking a lot lately about his fight with this brother, as he again saw just how far he had to travel if he ever wanted to beat him. The thing he was coming to terms with was that he may not be able to reach that goal alone like he had thought. Fighting with Sakura showed him that he could get further with the help of others. He replayed the fight in his mind, and every time when he went through it alone, he lost faster. Although even though he might need help, he still needed to get a lot stronger. He was going to have to train more with lightning elements and look into some new techniques. He had to refine what he had and also sharpen his skills. He opened his eyes as he looked around, and sweat dropped by the sight of it. There was both Kakashi and Naruto sitting next to each other, relaxing with towels around their lower faces. Kankuro still had on his face paint, and there was Jiraiya trying to find a hole in the wall into the women's section. Gaara was sitting down by the water but wasn't actually in it. Why am I the only normal one here? Sasuke asked himself, sinking slightly into the water. He looked at Kankuro. So why is Gaara not getting in? He doesn't like water much, the puppet user told him. He'll bath and stuff, but sitting in the water like this isn't his thing. He doesn't like how his sand turns to mud basically, and yes, I know he could leave the sand off, but I think it's a security thing with him. Sasuke gave a small affirmative grunt at that before trying to relax. After the stress of the day, maybe he needed time to let his mind just let go. Hey Pop, if you fall asleep in here, I'm not dragging your ass out, Naruto told Kakashi as the man was resting with his eyes closed. I mean, you're way too big for just me to pull you out. Just make some clones. Kakashi smirked behind the towel wrapped around his face. But don't worry, if I feel like I'm going to sleep, I'll drag myself out. I might have preferred to sleep right away, but I think this will be good for my body to help it recover. It does feel good. Naruto nodded and then looked at Jiraiya. Hey Ero-Senin, you better not be looking at Sakura-chan or Temari. Please. Jiraiya turned to scowl at him. I'm not into that, they're much too young for me. I prefer my girls to be a bit more older than that, although the Temari will grow up to be a pretty hot number. Wonder what she'll look like in a few years. He had a perverted grin on his face as he thought about it. Suddenly he felt himself surrounded by sand that was slowly tightening up. He looked around to see Gaara staring at him, and the old man suddenly felt those green eyes watching for any movement. He kept as still as a stone at that moment. The boy had caught him off guard, and he was quick with that sand. In a few years the boy would be a major force to be reckoned with, he bet. Keep your eyes on this side, Gaara said simply to him in his usual cold and detached voice. Okay, just ease up, he told the boy. Nor keep him in there for the night, Naruto told him. He'll just keep trying. Whose side are you are? Jiraiya yelled at the boy. Hey, I got a teammate on there, and I don't think Kankuro or Gaara will like the idea of you seeing their sister naked even on accident. Naruto explained. He's got a point there, Kankuro spoke up, although Temari could be a little uptight and can be a pain sometimes. She was his big sister, and someone peeking on her naked was something he didn't like to think about. He looked over at Gaara and was surprised that he must have thought the same thing. That boy really had changed since the Chunin exams, and for the better. Alright, I promise I won't peek, Jiraiya sighed. Now let me out of this. Gaara just stared at him for a moment. I'll think about it. What? Jiraiya yelled out, now wanting to get out of the sand. He only had a towel on, and all the sand everywhere was starting to get very uncomfortable. Kakashi, back me up here. Kakashi. They looked over to see that Kakashi had in fact gone asleep. Crap, now I got to carry him all the way up to the room. Naruto muttered. I'll help out, Kankuro told him, going to the other side of the adult. I think it's time to get out anyway. I might as well help out too, Sasuke spoke up. Jiraiya watched as all the boys ended up helping to take Kakashi out of the water and then into the dressing area, leaving Jiraiya wrapped up in Gaara's sand all alone in the male side. By the time he figured out a way out of the sand, everyone in the inn was already in bed and he was freeing from cold night air. Konoha. It took some time, but eventually they all made it home. Kakashi had felt much better after that rest, but it still would take a few days off to fully recover. Jiraiya had been in a sour mood for the first day for obvious reasons, but he got over it a day later. What was surprising was that Sakura and Temari had ended up being a bit closer, talking a lot together. Temari didn't have many she could call friends back home, let alone female friends, and she found it refreshing to talk to someone without all the history behind her getting in the way. They made it to the Hokage's tower. As they were shown inside, Jiraiya made most of the report to Tsunade. They explained how they had found only one base, of how many no one really knew. They all gave in reports of their fights, of the ninja they encountered, and also of the Akatsuki involvement. Tsunade had asked for a file from Shizune. During that, by the end of their reports, she had the file on hand. She pulled out several sketches and placed them on the desk in front of her. Do any of these pictures look like the ones you fought? She asked as they all took a close look. They all identified the 4 images on the desk. Tsunade leaned back. Hearing what they had said brought back memories of the report from attack at the Chunin exams. That's what I thought. These 4 were with Orochimaru during the attack. In fact, these images were created by Anbu witnesses. It seems like they were his personal guard that you faced, although that 5th one that Naruto and Gaara fought wasn't mentioned in the reports for some reason. Maybe he was held in reserve. Shizune asked. Maybe. Tsunade wasn't sure why that one hadn't been used, as Naruto and Gaara said the young boy had some kind bloodline with his bones. She had heard or a couple of bloodlines like that, but they were either very rare or died out. Extreme bloodlines like that took a great toll on the body and ended up being a double-edged sword, shortening the lifespan of the user. Still, it seemed that Orochimaru was surrounding himself with unique ninja. How he was getting them or finding them was anyone's guess, but it would seem that he was looking for specific talent. Well, it was something to think about later. Anything else any of you can add? She asked them as there were a few looks, but no one said anything. Well, I'll get a full report on this and I'll get a copy for you 3 to take back to Suna. That's fine, we have to book a place for the night here anyway, Temari told the Hokage. It was getting late, and if they left now they would only get a few hours of daylight before they would have to camp for the night. They also needed to replenish supplies before the long trip home. Can we pick it up tomorrow? That's fine. Tsunade was glad for it as she didn't have to rush on that. She had enough work as it was. Well, if that's everything, you all can go. If you don't mind, there is something I would like to talk to you about, but we don't need the others, Jiraiya said to her, giving her a serious look which she caught. She nodded her head as the others headed on out. The group left them, although some were wondering what he was talking about. Most were just too tired to think about it. They all had things that they wanted to do. Sasuke felt like going home and just falling into his bed. Sakura couldn't wait to get home and see her parents. Naruto was already planning on seeing if Hinata was still in the village or if her team had been sent on a mission while he was gone. The Suna team were looking towards some downtime. Kankuro hadn't had a decent chance to look over his puppets, and Temari was looking forward to the Konoha hot springs. Well, I guess we better look for a place for the night, Temari told her siblings. Plus, I want to check out those hot springs. I can show you where they are if you want, Sakura offered the older girl. Although it meant she wouldn't get home right away, she could spend a few more minutes showing her there. Actually, I could use some time in that later tonight. Want to meet up there once I show you the place? Sure, I'd like that. Temari gave a small smile. Hey, how about you all come by our place for a send-off? Naruto asked, getting excited as the idea just hit him. That way you can meet some of my friends too. How about it, Dad? You think we can do it? I don't see why not, Kakashi shrugged. Sounds fun to me. Kankuro looked to Temari and Gaara. It wasn't every day you get a decent send-off, and he was up for it if they were. Only for a bit, we still have to get back to Suna, you know. Temari told them they did have to get back, but she didn't see why they couldn't take some time to enjoy themselves. She figured they could spend a little time in the morning and then pick up the report from the Hokage's office and then leave. I would enjoy that. Gaara had never had anything like this done for him. He had never been invited to anything like this either, and he was surprised that he felt something good about it. He actually was looking forward to it. After a few plans were made, everyone split up. Sakura went with the Suna team, Sasuke went on his way home, while Naruto and Kakashi went their separate ways. As Kakashi made his way home, he hoped that Naruto got to see Hinata. Most likely he would spend the next hour regaling her with their mission. He chuckled at that thought. He hoped that Naruto enjoyed these fairly innocent times since they never lasted. Still, he wished Naruto luck in his budding relationship. He knew what it was to be in a relationship, although honestly, if someone asked him over a year ago, he would say that he didn't see himself with someone. Walking home, Kakashi thought about his life now compared to the past. He had lost so many in his life that were close to him that part of him didn't want to find someone because he wasn't sure he could handle losing another person in his life. Taking in Naruto had been a big step for him in several regards. It was a huge responsibility, but it also meant he was responsible for a life. Yes, it had its ups and downs, but overall he wouldn't have given up the experience. Besides, when he saw that little newborn who was all alone in the world, something inside of him knew that he didn't want that boy to know the kind of loneliness that Kakashi had learned about. Now here he was a father and in a good relationship. Thinking about it, he was actually happy these days. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in, well, he honestly couldn't remember ever feeling at peace. As he got closer to home, he was considering dropping by Anko's apartment to see how she was doing, but first he was going to get rid of his equipment, maybe take a shower. He entered his home and took off his flak jacket and placing it on the heavy hook for it. He would go over it later, making sure nothing was broken or replenishing the items it had. You learned to take good care of your gear when you went on missions. He walked a bit further in, just about to hit the bathroom when he stopped. When did you get in? He asked, smiling behind his mask, and soon felt familiar arms wrap around his shoulders. Damn it, how is it that you always know when I visit? Anko pouted. She really wanted to surprise him, but she found out years ago trying to surprise Kakashi was like trying to see him without his mask in public. You moved the picture on the wall. He nodded to the photo of one of Naruto's birthdays. It held a group of people in it. It was cropped, she defended herself. I swear that thing isn't on there, it keeps going lopsided. Kakashi tried not to chuckle. He had learned a while ago that apparently Anko was a little OCD about certain things, and pictures that weren't perfect she couldn't help but straighten them. He had once tested that theory out a couple of years ago at her place. Boy, she had been pissed after that. But what she didn't know was that he placed that photo like that on purpose, because it always told him when she was either here or had been here. I'll look into it, he told her. To answer your question, next time you sneak up on someone, don't wear that perfume of yours. Damn, I knew that was a mistake, Anko muttered as she let go of him as he turned to face her. Heard you were back and I wanted to see how things went. Where's the little rug rat? He went to see Hinata. Although we all came back, it wasn't exactly a success. Kakashi sighed. He should have known that news traveled fast in this village, so it was no surprise she must have heard of their return. We ran into some unexpected trouble. You find him? Anko asked, as both knew who exactly she was talking about. Yeah, but he managed to slither away. Damn it. She really wished Orochimaru had been killed. That bastard had been haunting her life for over a decade now, and what she wouldn't give to be free of his shadow on her life, not to mention that damn seal on her neck. Kakashi had helped with it, but it was still there. Sometimes she could almost feel it. Well, I did manage to get a piece of him, most of his lower half at any rate, but he pulled some kind of jutsu that managed to regenerate him. But I'm sure it hurt like hell, and using that took a lot out of him. He said to her. She did have a small smile pull on her lips. Well, that is nice. So that's the only problem. No, we ran into Itachi and his partner again, he told her as he noticed her stiffen slightly, but she seemed to recover quickly. When Anko heard that name, she felt her heart stop for a bit. Itachi had put Kakashi into a coma and might have done the same to Kurenai and Asuma, or worse if Guy hadn't shown up. She remembered how helpless she felt in that moment when she couldn't have done anything. All that time he had been in that bed worried if he would ever wake up. That name brought back so many bad memories. She quickly looked at him. Are you okay? He nodded his head. Tired, but otherwise I'm okay. Everyone came out of that fairly okay. Nothing major, although I will have to step up some personal training when I can. Kakashi sat down on the couch feeling how tired he was. All that travel hadn't helped with his chakra exhaustion, but he was feeling better at least. Anko joined him, sitting down next to him closely. Her hand went to his and gently grabbed it. I'm glad you all came back, especially you, she honestly told him. Since she had come to terms with her feelings for him, she could open up a bit more about certain things. It was still new territory for her, but when his hand lightly gripped hers in return, she did feel more assured by it. They were quiet a moment before she had to break the silence. You really need a shower. Kakashi chuckled. I was on my way to do just that before you jumped me. Oh. She smirked as she sat herself on his lap, suggestively wrapping her arms around his neck. You need help washing. Although he felt tired, he had to admit Anko could always make him feel energetic. He gripped her thighs as he pushed them up, standing up. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling herself close, their foreheads touching, staring into each other's eyes. She pulled down his mask and captured his lips with her own as he tried to make it to the bathroom without falling, or crashing into anything. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.